So I told the bowling story and I moved stuff around between hard drives and computers and I accidentally erased the entire thing. So I'm going to try and tell that story again and I hope it comes out as good as last time. It was actually pretty good. I'm sure I'll leave stuff out. I had notes. I don't even know where the notes are. So I'm just going to wing it. I mean, I lived it. I don't need notes, but there's some certain points I want to hit, you know. That's why I want my notes. So we recently went to a little girl that we know's birthday party, and it was at a bowling alley. And it was really nice. And my wife asked, am I going to bowl? And I said, no. And she said, why not? So I did BMX freestyle my whole life. I have too many injuries. I'm not sure I could bowl. I went bowling, it's been over 10 years now, maybe longer, just to see if I could do it. And I went with a friend of mine from church and we had a ton of fun. So a lot of people don't know this about me. This all starts way back after we moved to California. I didn't have a dad. So my mom went and got me a big brother. It's from the Big Brothers organization. Now there's different ones. They have like the Catholic one, the regular one, whatever. They're different Big Brother organizations. And my mom wanted me to have a big brother because I needed somebody, you know, as a boy, you need to have a dad around or an older, you know, figure to teach you things and lead you in the right way. So, you know, you get to talk to the different guys and see if you want them to be your big brother. So, you know, they come over, you talk to them and you're like, well, I like this guy, but you know, this guy's into ballet and whatever. I'm not into that. This guy's into this. I'm not into that. So you have nothing compatible. So you can sit there and like interview these guys, you know, and see who you're compatible with. Who do you want to be your big brother? So there was this one dude and his name was Hank. And he was actually a lot older. He was in his 60s at least by the time we're talking to him. And I was about 10 years old at this time. So he's much older. You know, if I'm 10 years old, I should probably have somebody that's like, you know, 30 years old or somebody that's more of a father figure. But I had a lot in common with this guy, even though some of the stuff I didn't, I learned later. Now, I've always played soccer all my life. I have a picture from when I was in 3rd grade from New York playing soccer. When we moved to California, I played soccer. I also played baseball. I ran track. I did a lot of sports. I was actually kind of more like a sports type of guy. Well, this guy was into baseball. And he had season tickets to the Angels. So we went to a ton of Angels games. He had like the perfect seats in the box section, like the expensive section. He had 3 seats that were season tickets. So that was really cool. We always went there. He was also into golf. So he would take me to the driving range. I've never golfed before. But we would go to the driving range and he would teach me how to use the different clubs on the tee, off the tee, all that stuff to do it correctly. And that's actually how I learned to drive. I'll throw that in there because I'm talking about Hank. I would love to do a whole story about Hank, but this is a major portion of it. So I don't know if I'll do a whole separate story about him because this is probably the biggest chunk of it. But after the driving range every time, we would go to this cul-de-sac, which was pretty long, and he would let me drive his car up and down the cul-de-sac, you know, backing it up, using the turn signals and the whole thing. I was 10 years old. And then we'd switch, and then because his car had a bench seat, it was some type of 60s Ford Galaxy 500, so it had a bench seat. So I would actually sit next to him after that. He would drive. He would use the foot pedals, and I would steer the car. I would also do all the turn signals. So he was teaching me how to drive by me sitting next to him. After he met me, he decided he needs a better car to get around because we're going all over Southern California doing things together. So he went and got a brand new early 80s Dodge Aries K car. It was a 2-door, but this thing was brand new. And we did the same in this car. I steered, I did all this stuff. I was doing everything. The only thing he ever did was the 2 foot pedals. That was it. So it was really fun. Well, this is also how I got my first job. He worked at a used car dealership and I was just there all the time with him, and so I learned how to do the paperwork. You also had to move the cars around because they taught me how to wash the cars. And I would always get these guys, hey, to get the keys off the thing. Hey, can you guys move this car, move that car? They got sick of doing that and they said, we're going to teach you how to drive. I'm like, well, I already know kind of how to drive. And they also taught me how to drive stick shift on the lot. And there was also a motorcycle in the back. I learned how to shift on that as well. So I was actually driving around this car lot with the motorcycle and the cars and everything because I had to be in charge of moving the cars and setting up the lot now. And I'm doing Hank's paperwork half the time. So it was a lot of fun. Well, when I was 10 years old, Hank was like, do you want to learn how to bowl? I'm like, okay, why not? You know, I don't know anything about bowling. Back in the day, you would go with your parents or other kids' parents because all the parents would bowl. All the kids would hang out in the arcade together or run around together, whatever we would do while our parents were bowling. We'd be playing arcade games, you know, video games, because in the 80s, that was the perfect time for video games. Trust me, in the early 80s, this was crazy. So I just woke up, but I remembered something else, and I needed to insert this into this video. Back in the day, you had a scorekeeper, or you would keep score for yourself when you were practicing. But when there was leagues going on, parents or whatever, you know, I'd go with Hank and everybody would be with their parents. They had scorekeepers and they had these things that look like overhead projectors. Not sure if you know what an overhead projector is, but they had these clear plastic things that you would write on and it would project up onto the wall or possibly on a screen, but it was a projector and you had to manually keep score. Well, when there was leagues going, they're on the 2 lanes. You have one team here of 4 or 5 people, and you have one team here of 4 or 5 people. Of course, they switch lanes. Most of the kids I knew, if you weren't in the arcade, you were keeping score. You don't expect to get paid, but more than likely, everybody would pitch in $1 or $2. So at minimum, you were going to get $10 for sitting there keeping score. And it was a lot of fun. It was something that we did as kids, you know, to make some money. Because even if you didn't know anybody, if you could just walk in as like a 10-year-old or, you know, 11-year-old and go, hey, do you guys need a scorekeeper? And they were like, heck yeah. And they'd all pitch in some money and you'd sit there for 3 games and keep score and make some money. They didn't mind back then. Now it's all computerized. But that was an extra little thing we were able to do, you know, and the parents knew you were sitting right there so they didn't have to really watch you. And it was something cool to do for a little extra cash. He goes and buys me my own ball, my own shoes, and my own bag. It was an 11-pound ball. And he starts teaching me how to bowl. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. One of the things we used to do was we would drive all over Southern California. We would go really far. We'd go San Diego because his sister lived down there. We'd go talk to people down there. We'd go to like San Bernardino. Keep in mind, we're in like Burbank. We would go all over the place and visit these friends. Now I say it that way. They were guys, not chicks. They were guys. And he would always make sure I had my ball and stuff with me. And we would go bowling. But he wouldn't bowl. I would bowl. And so we'd rent a lane. I would go bowling. And he'd be sitting in the back with a friend, one of these guys. And so, you know, Hank's teaching me how to bowl. Now keep in mind his age. He's in his 60s, so he's up there a little bit. That's even older than I am now. The people he's talking to are like his generation. And they'd be like, okay, John, come here for a second, both of them. And Hank would tell me some stuff to adjust, and he'd be like, let's see what he has to say, his friend. His friend would tell me how to do certain things, and Hank would be like, try whatever it is he said. See what happens on the lane. Now, keep in mind, I'm learning how to bowl at this point. So I would do stuff, you know, and improve or whatever. And we would do this every weekend. Every weekend we would go somewhere, talk to people, and we would do this. I got to the point where his ball was a 16-pound Tornado, an Ebonite Tornado. I started using his ball because I outgrew mine too quick. You know, when you're around, 10 to 13, you're growing really fast, So I started using his ball. So that he also entered me in a junior league at Marlindo Bowl in Burbank. I was also in another junior league at Jewel City Bowl in Glendale. I was in 2 junior leagues at the same time. Now Marlindo Bowl doesn't exist anymore, but in that spot is an apartment complex and it's called the Marlindo, which is nice. Little side story about Marlindo Bowl. It was a really nice place. They had their little arcade room. So they had one pinball machine and one video game. I don't remember what the pinball machine was, but when I started bowling there, it was Space Invaders as the video game. All of a sudden one time I went in there to go play Space Invaders and it was gone. There was this brand new game that just came out called Pac-Man sitting there. I'm like, what is this? So I put a quarter in, I die real quick, put a quarter in, I start learning how to play this game, and I'm like, this was brand new. This was Pac-Man. And nobody knew what this was yet. It was crazy. So and then you hear about, if you look up the whole Pac-Man craze and what happened with that and how arcades blew up. That was the start of it. But it just appeared there one day. I was like, wow, Space Invaders is gone, which is an old game anyway. But anyway, I started learning how to play Pac-Man and all this other stuff. So I'm in juniors and I'm bowling with Hank's 16-pound ball. Well, we're going all over Southern California meeting all these people. What I found out later in life, this is like way later in life, each one of these guys that Hank knew was an ex-pro bowler. And he used to bowl with these guys in like the 60s, maybe 70s, mostly 60s. All of them, every single one of them was an ex-professional bowler. And we would go all over California, Southern California, to go talk to these guys. And that's why he had me bowl. And he would bowl with me. I'd be doing it. And what they were doing by sitting in the back was they would watch my technique and they'd be like, hey, come back here for a second. And they would tell me what to adjust. So I actually learned how to bowl from all professional bowlers, all ex-professional bowlers. Now the weird thing about that is I have a very, very weird bowling style. It's very old. It looks like I'm doing ballet. It's very huge. My arms are really sticking out big and I'm doing this long stretchy thing. And it's very slow. I roll my ball really slow. And I have what's called a natural curve where you shake hands with the pins. Danny's a cranker. His ball goes from here all the way out, hanging over the gutter, comes back. He gets a ton of strikes, but when he misses by that much,
missed it by that much,
he'll get a huge split. But Danny's really good. So after I get a little bit of practice in and I'm in like juniors and stuff, Hank decides to put me in this tournament all over California. And you bowl across the different lanes and you bowl in different bowling alleys. And this goes on for a long time. This week you're over here in this city. This week and it's far. It wasn't like this is Burbank, this is Glendale, North Hollywood. No, it was like, this is like, way out there. This is way north up here. This is we went all over the place to do this tournament. It was huge. This took like a long time. After the whole end of it, I ended up getting 5th in the state of California at 11 years old. A lot of people don't know that. I used to have this big trophy in the house. I got rid of all my trophies. I used to have like hundreds of BMX trophies, and I had tons of bowling trophies, track trophies, baseball trophies. I had so many trophies, and every time we'd move, we'd take them. So one time we just decided, let's take them all apart. We'll make one big one and stick it on the sidewalk, see if somebody takes it. Because I don't care about that stuff. It's just stuff. It's nice to have to show people. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm not into that sort of thing. So I get 5th in the state of California. I'm bowling with Hank's 16-pound ball, which was hilarious. And my average at this time, I was 11 years old, was around. And when you're in juniors at 11 years old, that's not very common to have that. So I decided I wanted to be a pro bowler, even though I'm doing all these other sports. I also did BMX freestyle, BMX racing. I did a lot of sports. I decided, hey, it'd be cool someday to maybe become a pro bowler. And that could have been a thing. I'm not saying like, that to be egotistical or something. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it was like, that's a reality. And then as I got older, I'd be in other leagues like the church league and stuff. I've always had like a 200 average. But then Danny's dad ends up moving in with Bruce Leone to save some money, share an apartment together. And we're always hanging out there. Bruce is really good. He's better than all of us. And we would always do money bowling. Now, back in the day when I was a kid, they had blue chip bowling. You get blue chip stamps, fill out a book, go get prizes. We used to do money bowling, and the colored pins would come down. You get money, actual cash while you're there. You get the side pot for high score, try and make money. It's all fun. It's so much fun. Bruce was really good at this. So I said, dude, you should be pro. You're really good. And he goes, I'm making more money as a non-pro, which was probably true. He said, I'll never go pro. I'm making more money doing this. Well, of course, later in life, he becomes pro, which was funny because he said he never would. But that's good for him. I'm happy for him. Haven't seen him since a long time ago. Bruce had this extra bowling ball that he didn't want anymore. And it was an old 80s hammer. It was a blue hammer. That's what I call it. So back in the day, in the 80s, I used to be like, oh, blue hammer, that's the ball to have, you know. Of course, back then, pins were different, lanes were different. Technology changes in the bowling. So he sells this thing to me for like 25 bucks, whatever it was. It was something cheap. He had inserts in it. I took them out and I sanded down the thing to round them out for my fingers because it fits my hand. I didn't like the inserts. So that's the ball I used to use when we were doing money bowling. And even out here, when I went to bowl for fun with this guy about 10 years ago, I used my blue hammer. Now my blue hammer, it's old. It's from the 80s and the lane technology and pin technology is different. I still have that old bowling style. It's very slow and it's very ballet-like. It looks really strange. People make fun of me all the time. But that hammer, I call it the magic ball because when you roll it, and it rolls really slow because I don't roll fast. And it's going and it's going and then it hits the pins. Boom! It's so loud, it hits so perfect and just explodes the pins. And everybody always looks the first time it hits, they're like, what the heck was that? And then they see it's me and they're like, they can't put the two to two together. The ballet, the slow, and the boom. It just doesn't go together. It's really funny how it works, but it's really fun using that ball because I know it's older technology. After I make this, I'll try and go downstairs and find my ball. It always stays in the house because I don't want it outside. I'll show the blue hammer, and I also have shoes that are from Richie's dad that are from the 70s. So I'm wearing these shoes from the 70s and I'm bowling with a ball from the 80s, and my bag is also from Kmart. And I also have a red bandana in there that I wipe the grease off the ball with for the strike ball every time. So it's kind of funny when you see all the weird looking equipment and then you see somebody like me go out there doing this weird stuff, but it works. It's this old school way of bowling. And I don't know if people bowl that way anymore. But a lot of people don't know that about me, that I used to be that good of a bowler and how I wanted to be a pro, and it just never happened. You know, life happens, you have kids, you get married and stuff, and it just wasn't something I pursued, you know. So I hope you enjoyed that stupid little story, and I'll try and show some pictures throughout this video of Hank. I don't have that much. And I have a picture of me in his backyard. I really don't have any pictures of me bowling, no video. We didn't really carry cameras around back then, you know, and it was expensive to get the film developed and stuff. So I hope you enjoyed that story. Hopefully soon in the future, I'm gonna go actual bowling and see if I could do it with my injuries. I'm afraid I'm gonna fall down in front of everybody. That's the problem. I'm afraid I'm gonna fall, and you know, I'm the old guy. Do we laugh or do we help him up? Do we laugh first and then help him up? Do we call 911? I don't want to be that guy. So I want my wife to come with me to kind of, you know, make sure everything's cool. Thanks for watching. So here's the bag. This is from Kmart in the 80s. And then the tag, you know, you're supposed to put your name or whatever. It says, choose the Jesus lane. Bowl for Jesus. It's pretty funny. And then I have a red bandana around it. But here is the shoes. These are from Richie's dad. Those are from like the 70s. Those are the shoes. They actually work really well, which is pretty funny. I know they probably look funny to some people, but I don't care what looks do. I care about how the ball rolls. And there's the blue hammer. You can see the little piece of the insert in there, but I sanded the corners just enough so it wouldn't cut my fingers. I don't know what that means. I know it has something to do with the weight. I don't know where I'm sure people know how to read that. It's got the thumb hole air release thing because the insert was in there, so it won't go like that. But that is An old 80s blue hammer, and there's where it says hammer. But this is the ball. It goes super slow and hits really hard. So there you go. The Kmart bag from the 80s, the 80s blue hammer, and the 70s bowling shoes. That's the magic.